one of the doctors was sitting down next to me, and I looked at him and I said, "Am I dead?"
I'm sorry, what happened?
We got a pilot in the house, and I guess he landed in my backyard, and we were trying to see if we could get a ambulance to the house, please.
Okay, we're getting help on the way.
We had a military jet crash. I'm the pilot. We need to get rescue rolling. I'm not sure where the airplane is.
The reason marine aviation exists is to support the marine infantrymen. That's the whole reason we have, Ospreys and heavy lift helicopters and attack helicopters and F-35s and Harriers and Hornets, is to support the marine on the ground. The invasion of Iraq in 2003, where I flew as a young flight lead, flying north into Iraq as the sun was setting, it was starting to get dark. We had been told that Iraqi tanks were headed south. We had some aircraft dropping napalm, and the First Marine Expeditionary Force was breaching and coming across the border, identify an artillery piece and go to employ, lined up, and everything is culminating in that one moment. I pushed the pickle button, and I had a 1,000-pound bomb on my wing, and nothing happened. The bomb was just tightened down just a little too much. As long as you can learn from it and improve, people's careers aren't over. You don't fillet them for it, because you would have, you wouldn't have that culture of trust that's required to go out and do those things. If you make an error in the performance of your duties when you're following all the orders, then, that's a forgivable mistake, understandable mistake that we learn from and we move on. The experiences I had in Operation Iraqi Freedom really were the formative experiences that I would take through my whole career. And that's what gave me the judgment and the decision-making ability, right, to move on as a major, lieutenant colonel, and as a colonel. What a well-kept secret Marine Corps Station Buford is in the Low Country. I'd never been stationed there, and it was always an F-18 base, just a world-class organization. And I was very excited to be able to get that opportunity, and thought that the training was way better, far more advanced than anything I'd experienced in my entire career. Being given the opportunity to fly a fifth-generation airplane, the way that airplane is designed, and taking all the lessons from the Harrier and the Hornet and airplanes before, and brought them together in a short takeoff and vertical landing fifth-generation fighter, it's eye-watering. Some would say that it describes flying the F-35 as you're flying the computer. So in a Harrier, you have an input to the stick, you immediately feel it. You have an input to the throttle, you immediately hear it in the engine. The F-35 is a little bit different. You have an input into the stick, and the computer decides how it's going to handle that input to make the airplane do what you asked it to do. Same thing with the engine. You may move the throttle, and you may not hear what you're expecting to hear, because the computer gets a vote in deciding what it's going to do. The forecast was for improving weather. It was so good that we didn't even require what we call an alternate airfield. We went out to do just a 1 versus 1 training sortie, another opportunity to get more tactically proficient in the airplane. That was an uneventful sortie, and then we headed back to Charleston. The reported weather for the weather reporting system was still way better than it actually was. And the only amplifying remarks we got on the way in was that there was heavy rain around Charleston. As I'm coming down the glide slope, I get a momentary caution, and then it went away. Then it came back, and when it came back, though, it came back with a cascading number of cautions and warnings, over 25, that were rippling off, indicating to me that something was wrong with the airplane. And I started to get the sense of urgency that I needed to get the airplane on the ground. And then shortly after that, I lost the displays again. I lost the helmet. I lost the main display, which I would have looked to as a backup. I found myself looking down in between my legs at the standby display, and then making the decision that I needed to execute a missed approach. Every time the helmet and the displays fail, all the audio
fails, and I realize that I don't have any radio communications, so I don't really know what's going on with the airplane. All I know is that I was heading down towards the ground about 700 to 800 feet per minute, and I needed to start heading away from the ground. I go from, heads down, looking at the standby display, to executing the missed approach. Now I'm back up, trying to regain, and all of those cautions and warnings come back again. That created, the feeling for me that the airplane was failing and that it was very time sensitive. I have lost complete reference to the ground, no communications. Many of the systems in the airplane have failed. And simultaneously, what I know now is the lift fan behind me was spooling down as the airplane converted out, and it rotates a little bit, nose up, and I perceive that as the engine failing. When that lift fan spooled down, the airplane nose came up a little bit, created the perception for me that I was sinking with no visual references, and the display went away again, plus all the other failures that were described in the investigation. At that point, I made the decision. The airplane is going into the ground. There's nothing I can do to prevent it. This is a life or death decision for me, and I made the decision to eject. At that point, it was, I'm either going to die, and my assessment was at that point that I'm either going to die in this airplane, or I'm going to pull this handle and see if I survive this. I mean, that was really the extent of the thought at that point. I'd put my head back and put my hand down and pulled the handle. A loud pop, like a shotgun shell. And the next thing I remember is as I began to come up the seat rail, my helmet and mask got ripped off in the windstream. In the F-35, the canopy shatters. I have a few scars on my neck for where some of the explosive shrapnel, and it's common for people who eject out of an F-35. I remember feeling the precipitation on my face, and then just being pulled back as the drogue chute opened and they slowed me down. The next thing I was in the seat, and then I could hear the engine noise from the airplane. There's all sorts of safety measures in place to bring your body in so you don't get what we call flail injuries once you hit the slipstream, right? Once you hit the wind that you're going, whether you're going 200, 400 miles an hour. I said to myself, what just happened? At that point, thought that the airplane had completely failed, and that it would be, I would see it, a smoking hole in the ground as soon as I came out of the clouds. I realized I'm over a neighborhood and I'm heading for power lines. So my first thing is, man, God, please don't let me go into these power lines. So I released the seat pan and let it fall from about 600 feet. Once I cleared the power lines, I'm now headed for a roof. I'm thinking about how that's going to feel. I landed just on the back side of the backyard fence. So I'm laying there in the straps on the ground in the rain, thinking, what next? I probably need to call 911 and let them know that there's been an aircraft crash. And so I knocked on the door. A very surprised lady opened the door and started speaking to me in Spanish. And I think she was scared. When I realized, as this process, I'm knocking on her kitchen door, not her front door, her back door. So basically why I'm in the backyard. And soon after, her son came and invited me in out of the rain and called 911. My assessment was it was a family, father, mother, and a mid-20s son, and he was speaking to the 911, and the father wet a paper towel because I was bleeding on my neck, sat me down at the kitchen table, and started helping me out. It was pretty clear in my mind what happened, but at that point, I think I began to be in a little bit of shock. And I think every pilot would say, I would rather ride an airplane into the ground than it hurt someone else, right? And so, yeah, I was absolutely concerned about it and wanting them to get fire trucks and rescue vehicles rolling to help other people. Got into the back with the EMT. I kept asking her, has there been a report of the airplane? And she just kept reassuring me that no, there wasn't, that she would tell me if there was. And the same thing, of course, when I got to the hospital. But yeah, no, she just kept me stable until we got and reassured me that no one else was hurt. Over the last 28 years, I've made a lot of good friends, and when something like this happens, you find out who your friends are. Inevitably, the word gets out. Within an hour of the mishap, I was getting text on my phone saying, "Hey, I know you can't talk about it, but I'm glad you're okay." And word spread like wildfire through the pilot network and things like that. And I think that's just the way that it is.
I had some really good friends and a tremendous wife who kept me off of social media during that period. But I will tell you one story. It was about 5 a.m. I was at the University Medical Center there in South Carolina. My buddy who had driven down to be with me, a good friend of mine that I deployed with multiple times, he came right there, and he had been following things on Twitter. And he said, "Hey," he said, you're trending. You're trending on Twitter. You're like the #1 hit on Twitter right now." And I laughed, and he said, No, it's not you. It's the airplane. The airplane is trending on Twitter right now. And so, yeah, that was a tough couple days. Something like this has happened, and it's manifested differently before. Never happened the way that it happened to me. But in my case, the FFPB met, found no performance issues. The FFPB determined that the decisions I made that day were justified. I made a decision based off the system failure and the indications and failures that I had presented to me. I met my ejection criteria, and so it said my decisions were justified, and anyone with the same number of hours in the airplane would have made a similar decision.
I knew going out to Yuma that I was going to talk about it, especially with the pilots in the squadron that I was commanding, and my intention was to talk about it with all the pilots if they had a desire. And I broke it down into, in that scenario, in that environment, I can talk about the safety investigation report, I can talk about the FFPB, and I can talk about command investigation. We can look at them holistically, like they should be looked at, and talk about the lessons learned.
Across the wall. It's white wall, sir.
Social media is a part of what we have, and so you just have to be prepared for that. There are different ways to handle it, but it absolutely is a challenge for leaders, and it puts a big spotlight on leadership to have to answer or not answer the questions that are brought up by social media. I asked to speak with the commandant after I got my fitness report, which said I did a great job in command. The fitness report recommended me for promotion. And after I got that document that said I did nothing wrong, I asked to speak to the commandant to try to understand why I was unceremoniously relieved. And I was denied that request. Then the only conclusion I have is that it was optics-based, and that I made his life challenging in the halls of Congress and the Pentagon to try and explain what happened. It's not personal, it's just business. And my thought on that, after reflecting for a long time, is it's a people business. And so it may be just a business decision, but there's a human element that you have to take care of. And so you can't just discard someone to the side because it's inconvenient or a bad headline, right? You need to make sure you take care of the people. That's how you maintain that culture of trust.